Welcome to the GenC Podcast by Civis, where we, the next gen citizens, get real about the invisible rules that shape our lives and the power we hold to change them.
Hello everyone, welcome to the GenC Podcast. Hello Antra, how are you doing? How are you feeling today?
Hello. I'm good. I'm very excited for today's episode, Sukirat, and it's so nice to have this conversation with you. What's on the cards for today?
So today we are kind of experimenting with things, okay? So we thought we are almost knee deep down in consultations every month, every day. So we thought, why don't we do like a policy catch up? We want our listeners to know what's going on and what's changing around them, which they might have seen in headlines but may not have paid enough attention to just because the day to day can get so much. We hope to do one of these every month, but let's see where we go from this. So before we get into the consultations itself, let's actually tell the listeners, how are we coming to this conclusion? We source a lot of consultations, we get responses, we send them to the government, but how are we coming to the conclusion that these are the trends we are seeing, these are the themes that are emerging from what people are responding?
You know, that's really interesting, Sukirat, and I'm so excited that we're getting to actually talk about one of my favorite parts of the work that we do, which is the trends that we see at a very macro level. So Civis has been committed to try and understand, okay, how can we improve the public consultation process more? But in that process, what we've realized is that it's really important to know what's happening. And that's kind of the data that we try and pull together right now. So we look at, okay, how many consultations, which ministries, which thematic areas. We look at what are the citizens most interested in. And today, I think in the spirit of GenCing it, we're going to focus on what citizens have said in the last year and how that process has really taught us a lot. I think I'm always so fascinated by the work that we do because I get to learn so much, not just from the policy itself, but from the way people think about it. Don't you think that's been one of the big takeaways from the last year?
Yeah, just, looking at how people are responding and what they're responding to, more importantly, does show, a larger trend, which gives us an indication of what people are actually anxious about, right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because it's a bit of a mix. There is a lot of anxiety, but what we've noticed is that people typically may not comment on something that they largely agree with. So what you're hearing more of also is people's fears and concerns as compared to things that they find they are okay with overall. But even so, it's really interesting to kind of dig deeper into that.
Again, I caveat that this is Civis data, and I'm sure there's data that exists outside this universe as well. But largely talking about the top 3 trends that we saw in the last calendar year of 2025 is that people are most responsive to environment, internet and labor. And that obviously shows where priorities lie for citizens. Like environment, an increasingly anxious topic. I can tell for myself that I have been anxious about climate change and pollution for so long, and I am sure I have ranted about this in office as well. But so just forests feeling like they're shrinking, and then internet is feeling like it's becoming a tool for the system to watch us back. I feel like the citizens are stepping up, and I feel like that's such a motivating sign for us and for people who champion for democracy. I'll jump right into one of the major consultations that we saw last year in terms of environment, which was the Sanjay Gandhi National Park Eco-Sensitive Zone, a consultation. So somebody who's not from Mumbai, right? The Sanjay Gandhi National Park is basically the lungs of this city. And this city is vibrant and amazing only because that still exists in Mumbai. So the Ministry of Forest and Climate Change came up with the concept of having eco-sensitive zones around national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. And in 2016, Sanjay Gandhi National Park was actually declared an eco-sensitive zone, right? With varying dimensions ranging from 100 meters to 4 kilometers around the park's boundary. And for somebody who does not know what eco-sensitive zones are, it's a buffer zone around protected forests and national parks designed to reduce conflict between human and environment, which is an everyday debate today. And within the eco-sensitive zone, there is a concept called as the zonal master plan, which actually details out land use and regulatory plan within the eco-sensitive zone. And so under this draft plan, there were 3 proposed eco-sensitive zones which had varied regulatory limits. So one was basically peripheral zone, where we were trying and having relatively relaxed rules but still some sort of regulation to ensure that there's no effect on wildlife and ecology. Then there was a regulated development zone, when there was limited activities allowed with restriction. Certain eco-friendly infrastructure and small-scale tourism was still permitted in such zones. And then there was eco-sensitive zone 3, which was the core protection zone, where there was no human intervention allowed and full focus on ecosystem restoration and conservation. And we saw such large number of people engaging with us on this consultation, not only on our platform but even on social media, trying and getting their voices heard on this issue, right? Because every day is becoming a struggle to breathe normally in most parts of this country. And we saw that people are realizing this and want to contribute to this decision-making process.
You know, I can't just stop thinking about how you sound like such a true blue Mumbaikar. It's amazing. Yeah, and see, the thing is that it's so lovely what you brought up about people's voices really making their way into policy decisions, right? Something like this actually really impacted you and me, and that's why we picked up this case study to start with, because we feel it in our city day in and day out. But sometimes this conversation gets a little bit more macro. So the case study that I wanted to talk about today was of the data protection rules. Now, whoever's listening to this podcast is using some form of an internet service provider, Spotify, one day we'll get to Apple as well. And you're consuming data and internet just in hearing this little snippet of content that we've put together. What we saw actually was that the data protection rules last year came out for public consultation. And it's been really interesting for me personally to see, because it's come out in multiple iterations since 2018. So the government has put something out, either a policy paper or just a draft, got public feedback, tried to understand that and come up with a revised draft, right? It's taken us some time, but I think the beauty of what's come out on the other side is the fact that we have a much deliberated and somewhat living document to control data norms in India, right? I'm not going to geek out too much, but it's hard to hold me back. But I think the interesting thing here was that some sources said that the Ministry of Electronics and IT got 6,000 responses, okay? So in the month of March 5th is when the consultation ended. They got 6,000 responses, which they actually apparently analyzed by mid-July and took into consideration and came out with revised rules in mid-October or so. Now, this is a true blue 2025 success story, because you don't hear of ministries coming back with such kind of input so quickly. There were a lot of concerns and anxieties, Sukhirat, like you mentioned. Civis itself gathered about 627 feedback points from this entire consultation effort. And what we saw was that there was a lot of concern around notification of data breaches. So people wanted to be notified much sooner that a data breach had occurred. 72 hours and some wishy-washy language is what was used in the draft, and people said, oh no, you better tell us fast. In addition to that, we also saw that there were a lot of concerns around handling of children's data, and especially since there is a booming edtech industry in the country. So how do they handle children's data? How do they handle data like, for example, eye movement tracking, which they do? That was another key concern that actually came to the fore. And ultimately, there was also a lot of concern that came up on government's data usage without authority. Big questions, honestly, and we can't say that everywhere, the draft rules have answered some of these. But at the same time, it's really so important to keep this spirit and this data alive in public memory, because it shows us where we stand as a society at any given point of time. more than that, it also creates a record for us to go back to and say, okay, fine, you know what, people actually thought this or said this. And that's something that Civis really aims to do with the way that we collect data. It's not really to maybe understand for ourselves, but to create that public record. And I think that's something which is so important but undervalued in any democratic society. I have gone full macro.
Full philosophy, full fields have been served, but I will not complain at all. I feel like with the 2 consultations we spoke about, at least I noticed a common thread that citizens are increasingly becoming aware of the fact that they do hold some power to change things, right? And they do think that public consultations have the power to hear them, and if they respond, the government, the ministry, the regulatory body is going to take their feedback into consideration, and it's not going into a void. I am becoming philosophical.
I think what you're trying to say is that's damn GenC behavior on everybody's part. It's like, oh, hello, GenCs, we see you.
But that brings me to the question that have we been GenCs in the last 1 week? And I will take full liberty to ask you, have you done any activity, any gesture that would let us be part of the active citizens, the active GenCs?
I'm kind of squirming. It's been a week. I think I would love to and aspire to, but maybe not this week. I think this week my threshold was just reading the newspaper, getting through my day and being kind to everybody around me. I think that was all that I was able to manage. But what active citizen GenC-ness have you been up to this week?
First, I want to tell you that is more than enough. You are setting an example. Most GenCs don't read newspaper. The first step itself is keeping ourselves informed, right, with the right sources of information. And just being kind to each other is very important. While it seems like a very easy thing to do, I feel like it's become a very difficult task for people. So I think we are doing more than enough. And I'm saying we because maybe or maybe not, I have also not actively done anything apart from keeping myself informed.
Yeah, I think it's just such a nice and important reality check, right? To say that we can't maybe be active citizens every week, but if we look back to it and we try and see, there are actually things that we've done in a public spirited way. One tiny example is that every time that I'm in the lift with Sukirat, she'll always keep the door open for the next person to come. And she won't shut it in a haste, no matter how much of a rush she's in. And I think all of those things kind of help us build that muscle of active citizenship. And one day we'll come to the stage where we also voice our opinions on environment or data protection or labor rights issues. But for today, just being a kind citizen is maybe more than enough for all of us.
Oh, thank you. Also, I will now take the liberty to ask all our listeners to please give us feedback on what you want to hear, how are you feeling about our conversations, because only when you tell us, we'll be able to make this better for all of us. So write to us wherever you can on our email genc@civis.vote or our Instagram civis.vote, and do respond to an active consultation. The labor code rules are out and they're open for feedback till the 13th of Feb, and they affect you, me and everyone else around us. So do take out time to read the summaries and check out all the cool stuff that Civis is doing around the labor code rules. And we will see you super soon.
Thank you for listening to our wrap. And I'm going to go and say that this is a wrap on this episode. One lame joke has to happen every time.
Lovely. That's lovely. Okay, bye.
Special thanks to our production partner Nakul Agarwal and Loyalty Studios. Their expertise transforms our conversations into a seamless listening experience.